And what was that? Good grief. Hello, everybody, and welcome to a special live edition of Rebel HQ. I am David Schuster, and let's put the banner up. Well, that's not it. Where's this banner that we want? There it is. Here's the intro loop. Rebel HQ Live. Welcome to a special live edition. Good to have you on the show. Donald Trump had a news conference that was supposed to be about the economy primarily, but even that topic went off the rails. We'll take a closer look at that in just a moment. Plus, there's some new details about Trump's Project 2025, even though he has disavowed that. A new video has surfaced from one of the co-authors of the plan. There's some new polling on the vice presidential picks. Here's a little hint. Good news for the Democrats, really some bad news for the Republicans and J.D. Vance. There are also some hilarious new television ads that are out there related to the 2024 campaign. And by the way, I'm going to bring to you my book of the summer, my must-reading list, Playing Games at CNN. It's all about softball, but it's bigger than that. I'll explain. But let's get right into it. And let's start with the Donald Trump news conference at Bedminster, New Jersey, at his golf club right outside. This was the second news conference in a week that Donald Trump had, and the visuals were stunning, not so much because of what Donald Trump said, and what he said was pretty odd, but because of what Fox News was putting on the screen at the very same time. Watch.
Crash, and we're going to have a crash like a 1929 crash if she gets in. You saw a gentleman yesterday who got up, one of the top analysts in the world, frankly, and said that if Trump isn't elected, he predicts.
Okay, I'm going to stop it right there, because did you see what Fox News had on the Chiron just a second ago? Take a look at this. There's Donald Trump talking about a crash, and Fox News has as their Chiron at the beginning.
We're going to have a crash, and we're going to have a crash.
Actually, it's going to take a minute.
1929 crash if she gets in. You saw a gentleman yesterday who got up, one of the top analysts in the world, frankly, and said that if Trump isn't elected, he predicts, and he's predicting you have a stock market crash like 1929.
Okay, now look at the number, the Dow, 40,563. That's another record. So as Donald Trump is talking about, oh, there's going to be a crash, we're headed towards another 1929 depression-like event, the Dow is skyrocketing and setting new records. Let's keep going.
He also said the only time and the only reason the stock market has gone up, even though it had some bad moments recently.
Okay, so there you have it. Donald Trump is talking about how there's going to be a stock market crash if Kamala Harris is elected, and that we've already seen signs of it. And yet there's the ticker on Fox News showing that the Dow is above 40,000. That's how strange the news conference was. And oh, by the way, this is not the first time Donald Trump has predicted doom and gloom with the economy under Biden-Harris. Remember, it was just about a week and a half ago when there was a market correction, and the stock market, which had been at above 40,000, dropped about 3%. And by the way, that's not as much as the 10% daily drops that we had under Donald Trump 5 different times during his administration. But on the day that the market was dropping 3%, Donald Trump said, this is it. This is the Great Depression. This is a crash because of Biden-Harris. By the end of the week, by the end of last week, the markets had recovered and had regained everything they had lost, and they were back into positive territory, and they are again. So what Donald Trump is now saying as well, it's because the markets for a while, they think that I'm going to be back in office, and that's why the markets go up. And when they're convinced that Kamala Harris is going to win, that's when the markets go down. That's utter nonsense. It's totally cuckoo. It's crazy. And by the way, this is not the first time Donald Trump has predicted a market crash. You may recall that back in the 2020 presidential campaign, Donald Trump said, if Joe Biden wins, we're going to have a depression, a 1929 era event, kind of like what he's saying now. Well, since President Biden took office, the markets are up by over 40%. We've hit record highs in NASDAQ, the New York Stock Exchange, Dow Jones Industrial Average, over 40,000. And oh, by the way, let's talk about other aspects of the economy. During President Biden's first 3.5 years in office, he created 16 million jobs. During President Trump's first 3.5 years in office, before the pandemic, Donald Trump created 6.8 million. The reason we don't include the pandemic is because that was a whole big mess, and you can't necessarily blame Donald Trump for that, although some people would. But again, even in terms of economic factors like job creation, the economy has performed far better under Joe Biden than it has under Donald Trump. Now, the one issue where I think, and this is where Donald Trump's advisors seem to be sort of trying to push him, and the campaign keeps talking about, oh, are you better off now than you were 4 years ago? Polling shows that, yes, most Americans feel that financially their buying power was better off 4 years ago than it is now because of inflation. And inflation at one point got up to 9%, although now it's down to 2.9%. But in any case, the polling suggests that at least going into last weekend, most Americans felt that the economic direction of this country was headed in the wrong track and that they had more buying power 4 years ago than they do now. And that's why you hear so many Democrats say the baseline numbers, at least starting in this over the last couple of weeks, favored Donald Trump, because if Donald Trump is able to focus just on that, just on those economic indicators, and get people to ignore their 401ks, the retirement savings, the stock market, which has exploded, the low unemployment, the higher job wages that we have now, assuming Donald Trump can sort of push that aside and just focus on inflation, that's why so many of the Republican pollsters and pundits think Donald Trump still could win this thing. But Donald Trump is all over the map. Now, we're going to take some of your questions in the course of this discussion, and let's put some of them up. What do we got? Trisha, good morning, Trisha. Good to have you on board. Lots of blue hearts from James. Nice to have you. Trad, hi, y'all from Alabama. Hello, Alabama. Roll Tide. Get rid of the trolls and bots. Block them. Well, you know, we don't really sort of do that. And I don't have the capacity on StreamYard. I suppose I could just not put them up, but my eyes are not so good. So I just put up comments. And Miss Gail, you are 100% right. Trump does think that in his own words, looking up to the sky, saying, I'm the chosen one. Yeah, there's a certain sort of godly aspect to what Donald Trump, I think, believes about himself. One more question, then we'll move on. Am I blocked? Sulfi, no, you're not blocked. And Droyshed, only thing crashing is his brain. And you're not going to get an argument from a lot of Republicans right now. You literally have members of the Trump campaign that are tearing their hair out because they see some of the same numbers that we were just talking about, inflation and buying power and whatnot. And they want Donald Trump focused just on that, show some discipline. But instead, he is all over the map. He's talking about crazy stuff. He keeps going back to the Hannibal Lecter and the sharks versus electrocution and woe is me over the 2020 election. And instead of focusing just on what his campaign wants him to focus on and what Republicans want him to focus on, and that is some narrow issues related to the economy. Now, Democrats are having a field day. Let's put me back up full. Democrats are having a field day making hay out of this Project 2025, and I'm sure you've probably heard about it by now. It's basically the governing plan if Donald Trump wins for the first 100 days in office. There are organizations like the Heritage Foundation, the Heritage Organization, other conservative think tanks that have been trying to reimagine what government could look like under Donald Trump. So they came up with this 900-page document. It's got like 350 executive orders. They would essentially get rid of the Department of Education. They would essentially change the law enforcement aspects of the FBI and the Department of Justice to sort of get rid of the lawfare that they complain about. They would empower Donald Trump to use the military if necessary for whatever he needs to do and to get rid of protesters. So basically the Bill of Rights and the Constitution would be swept away. And again, all by executive order. And they would fire 50,000 government workers, government bureaucrats, essentially, replace them with diehard Trump supporters who would then carry out Donald Trump's wishes. It's pretty extreme stuff. And a few weeks ago, Donald Trump disavowed himself from that because it was polling so badly for him. I have nothing to do with that, he said. Well, it turns out that no, he does have a lot to do with it. His people are running the Project 2025 effort. And this week, there was a video that emerged from a British organization. They went undercover and they met with one of the authors of Project 2025 by the name of Russell Vogt. And Russell Vogt sat down at a five-star hotel in Washington. He thought he was talking to some relatives of very, very wealthy investors, so they might be able to give him some money for Project 25. But it turns out that they were undercover journalists working for a Center for Climate Reporting. The video was given to several news organizations, including CNN. Take a look at this. This is the Russell Vogt talking about the public criticism disavowing of Donald Trump from Project 2025. Watch.
So, we've got about 350 different documents that are regulations and things of that nature that we're planning for the next administration. And then you may say, okay, all right, DHS, we want to have a largest deportation. What are your actual memos that the secretary sends out to do it? Yeah. Like, there's an executive order, regulations, secretarial memos. Yeah. Those are the types of things that need to be thought through, so you're not having to scramble to do that later on. We were always going off of, if Donald Trump was head of this agency, what would he do with it? Yeah. What has he said? Yeah. And then what do we know from the first term? And that's how we've been approaching this. He's very supportive of what we do. and know that we have all manner of things that we do that's, even unrelated to Project 2025. So I see what he's doing is just very, very conscious, distancing himself from a brand.
And you're not going to publish those?
No.
They go straight to...
Yeah, they're very, very close hold.
Okay. Wow. So as I heard at the end, they're doing exactly what they think Donald Trump wants. Donald Trump's people are involved. This guy, Russell Vought, was in the Trump cabinet in his first administration. He was the Secretary of Office and Management and Budget. That's essentially the agency that oversees all the bureaucracy of the government. All the nonpartisan federal government workers fall under the OMB. And so this is the guy who understands sort of the way the government is put together and is drafting this 1,000-page document about how to essentially rip it apart, tear it apart, replace it with the most extreme Trump ideologies about governance in terms of policy, in terms of people. And he says, well, yeah, Donald Trump is, publicly sort of disavowing it. And we understand that because of the politics, but no, we're doing everything that he wants. Okay, so this is a pretty scary stuff and good for this British organization, the Center for Climate, let me make sure I have this right, Center for Climate Reporting, to go undercover. I believe that was an actor that they hired to sort of pretend to be this family of a wealthy investor and to get this Russell Vought talking about what he's doing and about the connection with Donald Trump. And so it adds more fuel to the fire for Democrats, for good government Republicans who are terrified about what Donald Trump might do to the civilian workforce, the federal government bureaucrats, in terms of 50,000 losing their jobs. It also underscores that there are real plans in place to deport 12 million undocumented migrants, to round them up, put them in camps, and then send them back wherever, and that there's a real effort to help Donald Trump use the military to enforce his policies if he wins and there's any sort of objection. This is scary stuff. It's frightening stuff. So kudos to this British organization for going undercover and getting Russell Vought to talk about it. And it's all over the place now on CNN and everywhere else. And again, keep in mind that Republicans don't want to talk about Project 2025 because they feel that it's damaged goods for them. It's too extreme. And for good reason. And you have Republicans keep talking about, well, this is what Donald Trump wants to do, Project 2025. Okay, let's move on. Let's talk about, and by the way, Project 2025, the idea of, firing 50,000 government workers, having the military get people off the streets. To a lot of people, that does sound extreme and weird. And it makes Donald Trump and his campaign look even more sort of out there compared to how most of us probably feel about our government, our institutions, and the population. Well, what the Harris-Walz campaign has been doing for the last 2 weeks now is to try to make this contradiction between the extreme creepiness, weirdness of Donald Trump and J.D. Vance and the sort of more normal stability, if you will, of Kamala Harris and Tim Walz. And so you've been hearing a lot about ordinary Midwestern values from Tim Walz, and Kamala Harris was speaking the other day about having worked at McDonald's. They're trying to make themselves even more relatable to average American voters and come across as just, your sort of typical good government workers, as opposed to the scary, frightening, creepy, weird government that Donald Trump would stand for. And so as part of that, this week, there was a fascinating video that the Harris campaign put out. And it was basically Kamala Harris and Tim Walz, not sort of on the rally. And again, this video had made no news. It didn't go into any significant policy. It was just the two of them talking about their favorite kind of food and tacos and music. And there was some self-deprecating banter back and forth because Kamala Harris noted to Tim Walz, when I first tried to call you to tell you that I wanted you to be my running mate, it rolled over into voicemail. What was that about? Here's the video. Watch. Pretty funny.
Oh. I called
I was hoping
you, Tim.
maybe we wouldn't have to.
I called you, Tim.
Yes.
You didn't answer, Tim.
I know.
What happened?
The most important call of my life. It popped up, and we didn't recognize the caller ID, and it went to voicemail.
Hi, this is Jim. I'm not able to answer.
There you go.
It's possible. Thank you.
Hey, Tim, it's Kamala. I really want to talk to you.
It is an amazing privilege for me. Also, I'm excited. I just want to be part of the excitement that you're generating.
Well, we're doing it together, buddy.
It's fun.
We're doing it together. How have these last couple of days been for you?
I can see where the energy comes. America is a hopeful country.
Indeed.
People are excited.
In every one of those groups of thousands, sometimes over 10,000 people,
you've seen exactly who we are as America.
Yeah.
People from rural areas, urban areas, of every stripe and size and background. This is who we are as America, and we're all in it together.
Yeah.
And in this campaign, the only way we win is to keep the pedal to the metal for these next many, many days that we have. So, Tim, what's your relationship to music?
Yeah.
All right, we're going to talk about Tim Walz and music another time. But my point in running this video, and some people say, oh, this is kind of corny. They're talking about tacos and music and everything else, and how come Tim Walz didn't pick up? But the point of this video is what's important, and that is that they are making this contrast very clear between Tim Walz, Kamala Harris being relatable, normal sort of people who have some maybe corny tastes in food or music or whatever it is, and sometimes they miss phone calls like all of us do. And they're making the contrast between them being relatable and sort of the weirdness of Donald Trump and JD Vance. And keep in mind that Donald Trump has repeatedly underscored that he's not quite like the rest of us. He's promoting that he's, successful businessman, a billionaire. He's the best negotiator ever, that he's one of the best golfers ever. I mean, most of us are not, even if that stuff were true, most of us are not that. And so the Harris-Walz campaign is trying to drive this wedge between the image of Donald Trump and JD Vance as being creepy, extreme, weird, and the image that they are building of being average, normal folks who are, nice people and joyous and happy and have some, reasonable ideas about what to do with government, like raising the minimum wage, extending healthcare, providing free meals to school children, passing common sense gun regulations like what Tim Walz did in Minnesota. Now, related to all of this, of course, and what's helping the Harris campaign, and we're going to talk about some of the vice presidential poll numbers in just a second, is that Tim Walz has become a viral sensation. The videos that we've been putting up of him, and we're seeing this across on several different platforms and other, Twitter feeds and other YouTubes, Tim Walz has got the public captivated. The public is fascinated. Voters are fascinated by him. And it may be just because a lot of people just didn't know who he was. I think there was a poll a few weeks ago that when Kamala Harris picked Tim Walz, 70% of the United States had no opinion or never heard of the guy. He was a relative backbencher, member of Congress for 12 years, governor of Minnesota for 5.5. But again, there's a lot about Tim Walz that the public is starting to get to know. And what is being put out there so far, the public loves. And his videos keep going viral. And so as an example, I want to play for you about the first minute and a half of a piece that we did, which was one of the most watched YouTube videos we have put together in Rebel HQ over the last year. Here it is. Hold on one sec. Move this. Let's add.
Buddy, Tim Walz here. Well, not a normal week, which is a good thing.
It's just an update video, but this latest post from the Democratic vice presidential candidate has generated over 2.5 million views.
This sign.
Another video of Tim Walz taking a selfie with Kamala Harris has more than 1 million. In just a few weeks, Tim Walz has become a political and viral sensation. Wow. Especially with millennial women.
After getting to know Tim Walz for the last few weeks, I have realized something, and it's very profound. He represents the dad that a lot of liberal women lost. A lot of us had moderate to conservative, educated, sensible fathers that we lost to Rush Limbaugh, that we lost to Fox News, that we lost to Donald Trump.
The fatherly vibes and Midwestern approachability are part of most Walz highlight videos. This was his interaction with school children after signing a bill to provide free meals. Last year, Walz and his daughter promoted the Minnesota State Fair.
I think we're gonna go do the slingshot.
Which I don't know what it is, and they're keeping it from me. But then we're going to go get some food. Corn dog.
I'm vegetarian.
Turkey then. And
Turkey's
then,
meat.
Not in Minnesota.
For me, the transformation.
Okay, I had a mispunch here. So let's go back to the video that I was.
And we will go do some of those things and report back.
So I had to stop it there because the reason I try to stop it there is because, here's daughters, I'm a vegetarian, turkey's meat, and he says not in Minnesota. That's just, I don't think you can, that's his wit. That's his sort of dad, corny sense of dad humor, and it works for him. Let's keep watching. The dad humor and enthusiasm then intensified on the ride itself.
Yes! Oh my God! Keep going.
Yes!
That was good. Good job, Dad.
Oh, thanks, so. All right.
right, Minnesota, it's worth it.
But the Walz personality, which friends say is the same at home and at work, is more than just joy and a quick wit.
Okay.
By all accounts, Tim Walz is also earnest and direct.
We can't talk about public safety without talking about guns, so let's have that conversation. I'll go ahead and put my credibility up against anyone on this issue. I'm a veteran and I'm a hunter. And for many years, I was one of the best shots in Congress, and I got the dang trophies to prove it. I know guns as well as anyone, but I'm sick and tired of talking about that, because I'm not just a veteran, not just a hunter, not just a gun owner. I'm a father, and for many years I was a teacher. And we all know damn well weapons of war have no place in our schools, in our churches, in our banks, or anyone wants to live in peace.
Okay, and standing ovation with his State of the State address in Minnesota. And look, you see it right there. Tim Walz, he's direct. He's not afraid to sort of say what's on his mind. He speaks kind of quickly with a fast cadence, but he's also got that sort of Minnesota, Midwestern earnestness, politeness with a very quick wit. He's likable. And let's get to some of the polls, because I want to explain why this matters now. So with, a couple of weeks of Tim Walz being out there and JD Vance being out there, here's what the latest ABC News Washington Post Ipsos poll has just found. And this is the first major poll to be done on the vice presidential candidates. Tim Walz, favorable, 39%, unfavorable, 30%. JD Vance, favorable, 32%, unfavorable, 42%. In other words, J.D. Vance is 10 points underwater in terms of favorable, unfavorable. Tim Walz is 9 points, if I'm doing my math correctly, 9 points positive. That's significant. And we've said, and you'll hear political scientists say, well, a vice presidential candidate never really makes much of a difference. And historically, they haven't really changed the outcome of any sort of election. And that's true, but if anybody might be the exception to the rule, it could be Tim Walz because of what he's bringing. He's enabling the Harris campaign now to reach out and to get voters, particularly in the Rust Belt, Michigan, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, who might have otherwise stayed home, but now they are sort of intrigued by this guy, Tim Walz, and they're desperate to learn more information. And all those clips we showed you, which, by the way, have been popular in Minnesota for a while, they're now being paired with the Tim Walz clips of him ridiculing J.D. Vance and Tim Walz talking about Project 2025 and all the things that Tim Walz is bringing to the Harris campaign. So for a lot of Democrats who, I'd say a month ago, sure, it looked like, Joe Biden needed to step out, but there was some angst about Kamala Harris. What kind of campaign would she run? A lot of us remember what she did in 2020 when she didn't even make it to, she didn't make it very far in the primary. She ran a bad campaign. And then there was a lot of office turnover when she was named vice president. The first year she lost her chief of staff and press secretary and on and on. And there were some, rumblings about that she was not easy to work with. So as a result, because that was sort of out there and because of divisions between the White House Biden staff and the Harris staff, there was some angst over the last several months about, okay, if Biden goes, does it really need to be Kamala Harris? Well, she has run a far better campaign, far more sort of disciplined and organized and exciting, and she speaks better than she did 4 years ago. And her vice presidential pick was better than anybody imagined. And as a result, that's one of the reasons you see so much Democratic enthusiasm and energy. It's not only that President Biden stepped away, but it's the Harris campaign is very different from the one that she was running 4 years ago. It's a very smart campaign. It is on message. You keep hearing Kamala Harris and Tim Walz talk about freedom, freedom for women to make the choices about their own bodies. And by the way, abortion is probably going to be one of the top issues and a sleeper issue for a lot of independent, moderate voters, women particularly. And then, of course, freedom for children to not get shot when they go to school. And then another aspect to it, the freedom to finally be free of Donald Trump, to finally have him go away. Here's some of the polling, the national polling that has come out on sort of the Harris versus Trump. And this is pretty significant. Emerson polling, which showed the race, Donald Trump slightly ahead a month ago over possible Joe Biden. Actually, it was 4 or 5 points over Joe Biden. Harris 50, Donald Trump 46. 50 to 46, the margin of error is 3, so Harris is outside the margin of error. And these are national polls. Rasmussen Reports, which is a traditional Republican pollster, not necessarily very credible, though used by Fox News. Harris 45, Trump 49. That's a 4-point difference. The margin of error in that one is 2. Fox News poll, Harris 49, Trump 50. 1 point difference. The margin of error is 3. morning consult poll, which is considered one of the most reliable that's out there right now, Harris 47, Donald Trump 44. And then when you go state by state to some of the battlegrounds, Harris has a clear lead in 2 of the 7 battleground states, and she is within the margin of error in 4 of the 5 remaining battleground states. It's a statistical tie. So that is a very, very different election dynamic than we were seeing a month ago with President Biden as the nominee. And I think that's one of the reasons you're seeing Democrats so excited to, with what's going on. Not only is Harris' campaign running, is it a good campaign, but the poll numbers are falling in place. The vice presidential pick, Democrats believe, is a home run. And they're able to reach a lot of voters that previously were sort of never Biden, never Trump, the no voters who are now thinking, okay, maybe I actually will participate in this election. And you're seeing a lot of those voters fall into the Harris camp, and a lot of sort of leaning Republican voters who are now back to who are moving to being undecided. So the whole sort of thing has shifted. Let's get a couple of your comments. Thanks, Tracy. Whatever. Let's go to some. Who is this? Question mark. I don't know who this is. Let's see. Liquid. Trump is going to lose and he will cry election fraud. Be prepared, people. He's already laying the groundwork. That's an important point, because Donald Trump has got thousands of people all around the country and lawyers in every sort of battleground state who are already preparing to challenge the certification of the results if they don't go Donald Trump's way. That hasn't been a huge story over the last couple of weeks because of everything else going on with Kamala Harris joining the ticket and now Tim Walz. But the preparations for challenging this election are in place on the Republican side. And so, that will be challenging, especially if this race is close. Chet Lee, you bet. Let's see, what is this? Kamala may have gone to high school in Canada, maybe. However, requirements for U.S. presidents is that she is a born U.S. citizen. She is. She's highly educated and accomplished, too. Yeah, she's born in the United States. There's no issue with her qualifications. All right, let's talk a little bit about President Biden. Because in the midst of Kamala Harris and Tim Walz having a good campaign and the poll numbers, the momentum shifting to them, and Donald Trump and J.D. Vance eroding, President Biden is now out there helping Kamala Harris on the campaign. Major event yesterday. And on the way there, it almost seemed like President Biden was a bit unleashed and feels like a certain sort of burden, freed from a certain sort of burden about what he says and what he does. And I want to read this for you because you can't hear it very well on the Fox video, although I'm going to play the Fox video for you in just a second. President Biden walks out of the White House, and here's the question and answer exchange. How much does it bother you that Vice President Harris might soon, for political reasons, start to distance herself from your economic plan? President, she's not going to. Mr. Trump said he wants to make America affordable again. Your response? Ha, ha, ha. Well, he ought to get a job. When will the Vice President hold a news conference? You have to ask her. Will there be a deal for the hostages in Israel? Fingers crossed. Do you have any regrets? Talking to you guys. Here's the video. You can't hear it very well, but I just previewed
Vice President Harris. You know what tell you call. The economy is going to continue with all those legislation and taxes working. In case you haven't noticed, it's working.
How much does it bother you that Vice President Harris might soon, for political reasons, start to distance herself from your economic
She's not
plan?
going to.
You don't think she's going to?
Mr. President, Trump said you're
not there at the negotiating table.
We're represented by both the Qataris and the Egyptians. The negotiations are going on right as I speak. I just got off the phone.
And are you expecting the Vice President to differentiate? What's your message?
Mr. Trump says he wants to make America affordable again. Your response?
So you ought to get a job.
When will the Vice President hold a news conference? When will the Vice President hold a news conference?
You have to ask her.
And also, sir, in Sudan? Sir, Sudan,
Do you have any regrets?
sir?
Do you have any regrets? Talking to you guys.
Sir, Joe Donnelly, the U.S. Ambassador at the Holy See, sir.
Any regrets? Talking to you guys. He's witty. President Biden, for all of the damage that was done to him, largely by the Democratic Party and by people who were freaking out a month ago, he still has his moments when he's sharp and he's witty and he's the ultimate politician who can engage in banter. And I think he does feel a certain sort of freedom to say things now that maybe when he was the presidential candidate a month ago, he was not able to say. But good for him to sort of put the media in their place. Some of the questions, particularly those from Fox News correspondent Peter Doocy, I mean, it's GOP talking points, and President Biden is better than that, and he continues to humiliate Peter Doocy, as does Karine Jean-Pierre at the White House briefings, and it's fun for a lot of us to watch. You think, you know what? Those people who cover the White House who claim to be correspondents when in fact they're just carrying water for the Republicans and the GOP. Come on. All right, let's run a couple ads. Harris-Walz is out with a new ad related to the presidential contest. And this comes right as a lot of children are going back to school. Watch this. Let's try this again.
I love you. Have a great day at school.
Dictator on day one. There will have to be some form of punishment for women.
Roe vs. Wade was terminated.
Fire, fury, bloodbath. Now get in.
You know what, honey? I'm gonna drive you today. Besides, can convicted felons even drive school buses?
If you wouldn't trust him with your kid, why would you trust him with your country?
Hilarious ad in the first 20 seconds, and then it gets serious. And, it makes a good point. I mean, Donald Trump comes across as sort of frightening, scary to a lot of people. So if you wouldn't trust him with your children or your family and to drive a school bus, why would you trust him to sort of drive the country? And a lot of people don't. And that's the issue. And getting back to the contrast we were talking about earlier between the Harris-Walz campaign trying to come across as reasonable and normal, that they stand for stability and democracy, and Donald Trump stands for instability and tearing democracy apart or burning it down. The Lincoln Project is also picking up on this theme as of portraying Donald Trump as sort of weird and creepy. And they have sort of an interesting approach in their ad. Here it is. Watch.
People are eccentric, offbeat, maybe a little kooky. Yeah, they're oddballs. Not quite normal, but hey, it's America. We're okay with that. But this guy is weird in a bad way.
If you look at Martin Luther King, when he did his speech, we actually had more people.
Weird in a creepy way.
You're going up the escalator? I'm going to be dating her in 10 years.
I've said that if Ivanka weren't my daughter, perhaps I'd be dating her.
Weird in a dangerous way.
In 4 years, you don't have to vote again. We'll have it fixed so good you're not going to have to vote.
Just weird.
Don't you find some of their stuff to just be plain weird?
99% of the things I'm saying are common sense.
Too weird to be president.
These guys are creepy and yes, just weird as hell.
Good ad by the Lincoln Project. And again, that whole concept of Donald Trump being weird and sort of abnormal. And it's not just, by the way, coming from Democrats. The internet is picking up on some of the crazy things Donald Trump has said over the last, several months, and having a field day mocking it and ridiculing it. And one of the most hilarious things that I've seen was, for all of you who are movie buffs and saw the movie with Jack Nicholson from, I think it was 1980s, maybe, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. I may have that wrong, late 70s. But there's a great scene where Donald Trump, where there's a guy who's in a mental ward and he's speaking, and all the people in the mental ward are just sort of looking at him. And the guy's going off on this bizarre tangent. Well, they took the clips from One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest and they inserted Donald Trump into it. We can't use that because of the copyright issues with the movie. So what I tried to do is I did a piece where I try to sort of play off that theme just to sort of underscore how strange some of what Donald Trump says, just how weird it is. Watch this.
I say, what would happen if the boat sank from its weight and you're in the boat and you have this tremendously powerful battery and the battery's now underwater and there's a shark that's approximately 10 yards over there. By the way, a lot of shark attacks lately. Do you notice that? A lot of shark. I watched some guys justifying it today. Well, they weren't really that angry. They bit off the young lady's leg because of the fact that they were not hungry, but they misunderstood who she was. These people are crazy. He said there's no problem with sharks. They just didn't really understand a young woman swimming now really got decimated, and other people too, a lot of shark attacks. So I said, so there's a shark 10 yards away from the boat, 10 yards, or here. Do I get electrocuted if the boat is sinking, water goes over the battery, the boat is sinking? Do I stay on top of the boat and get electrocuted? Or do I jump over by the shark and not get electrocuted? Because I will tell you, he didn't know the answer. He said, nobody's ever asked me that question. I said, I think it's a good question. I think there's a lot of electric current coming through that water. But you know what I'd do if there was a shark or you get electrocuted? I'll take electrocution every single time.
Yeah. It's like, this stuff belongs in an insane asylum, not a presidential campaign. If you didn't know better, if Donald Trump was just some sort of random person, if he was a family member, he'd say, this guy needs to be checked out. he needs to talk to a therapist. He's got some clear sociopathic narcissism that's going on here. And never mind the strange stuff at the speeches about, sharks versus electrocution and Hannibal Lecter and, the poisoning the blood and quoting Hitler and all the different stuff that Donald Trump does at his speeches. Donald Trump did something this past week, which is perhaps even the most extreme thing I have ever seen in 30 years of covering politics. Kamala Harris had a rally in Detroit, got 5,000 to 10,000 people. Donald Trump must have been hit with some bad news about polling or about, his own sort of numbers, because he went on Truth Social and he suggested that these people didn't exist, that the Harris campaign used artificial intelligence to create the crowd in Detroit. Here's the piece we did on that. Watch.
He has completely lost it. This post is beyond question delusional.
On MSNBC, it was a reference to this. Trump posts absolutely bonkers conspiracy about Kamala Harris' crowd size, easily disproven by video evidence.
And it's like Hitler, when Hitler was moving around divisions that didn't exist in the last 10 days of the war in the Fuhrer bunker.
Truth Social. Has anyone noticed that Kamala cheated at the airport? There was nobody at the plane, and she AI'd it and showed a massive crowd of so-called followers, but they didn't exist.
The Republicans are freaking out because Trump can't stay focused. We had that unhinged news conference last week. We had these fundraisers where he's giving private remarks, talking about crowd size, doubling down on his attacks about the vice president's identity, and then culminating in that Truth Social post, which I have Truth Social, I'm sorry to say, and I triple checked it to make sure it was a real post on his site, and it was.
Quote, "She's a cheater. She had nobody waiting, and the crowd looked like 10,000 people. Same thing is happening with her fake crowds at her speeches. This is the way the Democrats win elections, by cheating."
What's happening here is he realizes he's gotten under more pressure than ever, because he's not just running for the presidency, he's running for his freedom. He's going to go to jail if he does not win the presidency, and he can see that now. And that's why he's doubling down on the unreality. It's partly for self-soothing, partly it's just because he can't help it. He's a pathological liar, being a sociopath.
She should be disqualified because the creation of a fake image is election interference. Anyone who does that will cheat at anything.
No,
Wow. So a couple of things here. First of all, I look, Donald Trump, he has his policies, he has his claims about being a great negotiator, being a successful businessman despite all the bankruptcies. It goes on and on and on. Maybe even his claims that God chose him because he survived an assassin's bullet by literally this much. That's fine. But to actually put out there publicly that Kamala Harris and the Democrats must have been cheating with the crowd size and using artificial intelligence, that is really bizarre. And by the way, Donald Trump wasn't laughing or wasn't joking with this. This wasn't satirical. He was deadly serious. He was angry about it. And anybody who would make that sort of lie, that sort of whopper, and has that kind of bad judgment to sort of, even if he thinks, oh, they must have done something to get the crowd size. Okay. I once covered a rally where John McCain back in 2000 had like 1,000 kids screaming and yelling when he arrived at South Carolina at 2 a.m. He had just won the New Hampshire primary, and he had these kids that were just going crazy. What was the reason? Free beer and pizza and buses that shipped them in from universities. And so John McCain arrives, the Straight Talk Bus Express arrives. There's this airport hangar. We're all bleary-eyed after having come from New Hampshire. And we're like, how on earth did he get these people here? Okay, he provided free beer and pizza and the opportunity to see the guy who just won it. So there are different things that, yes, advanced teams do to try to get a crowd there. But for Donald Trump to say that this is artificial intelligence that Kamala Harris was involved in, that is crazy. And if he's willing to say this publicly about his Democratic rival, imagine what Donald Trump would say publicly if he gets in office and say he wants to, I don't know, go to war with China or bomb North Korea, or wants to impose tariffs, or wants to do something that may not be in America's best interests, or sweep people off the street using the military and taking away people's First Amendment rights. If Donald Trump is willing to lie about his Democratic opponent in such an obvious, ridiculous, crazy fashion, imagine what Donald Trump's going to be willing to do if he gets back into office and wants to lie to the American people to justify whatever he's going to do. That's lunacy. And this post was just crazy. I mean, this is a guy who should be locked up. And it's, we laugh about it, we ridicule it, but in many ways, it's not very funny. But I want to end on something. Let's put a couple more comments up, and then we're going to end this. It would be better watch Kamala beat him and watch him go to prison. Here. Isn't it shocking that our traditional news channels never say a word about Trump's insanity? It's shocking, really. Look, there are going to be books written, Mark, about this for years, about the media malfeasance and whether the media just totally dropped the ball. Because in my view, the media should be holding him accountable and talking about the insanity and the unhinged rants. That the moment we sort of become numb to it, like, oh, that's just Donald Trump, well, we have lost our bearings. It's not our responsibility to change Trump. And there was a reporter from the Washington Post that said, oh, yeah, you're blaming me when I can't change Trump. No, it's not your job to change Trump. It's your job to inform the American people about what's going on. And what's going on is this guy is nuts. He is lying. He's saying things that are absolutely insane. And the media has a responsibility to point that out. And also, when Donald Trump says it at a rally or a debate, the media should be pushing back and fact checking him. And I've said it before. That's why the CNN debate, and I'm going to talk about CNN in just a second, but that's why the CNN moderated debate with Jake Tapper and Dana Bash was such a low moment for the media, because they essentially sold out. They agreed, okay, yeah, we'll do the debate, but there's not going to be any fact checking. We're not going to do any, pushing back on either candidate. We're just going to ask questions and let him go and legitimize and essentially give him a platform for this nonsense. And it was ridiculous. Anyway, okay, I want to finish off with my book of the summer. So Barack Obama came up with his reading list just a couple days ago. I have one book on my August reading list for those of you who have a week vacation before school starts. As some of you will know, because of my history, my career in broadcast news started out at CNN. In the early 1990s, I was a field producer and desk editor at CNN. And one of the great fun things that helped with camaraderie was softball. And that in the spring and summer, just about every Saturday, we would have a doubleheader and we'd play in a media league against ABC and the Washington Post and NBC and on and on and on. And the connections and the bonds that you develop with somebody, as all of you know, who are part of ensembles or part of sports teams, there's something very special about your connection with people that you sweat with and bleed with and try to beat other people with. So a book came out by one of my dear friends, Jim Barnett. He was a producer at CNN for many years. It's called Playing Games at CNN: How a Softball Team Captured the Spirit of a News Network. I love this, not only because it's not only about softball, and it's not only about sort of the hilarious stuff that happened on the softball field and the way that we described it to our colleagues, but it goes into something sort of much deeper that I was talking about last week. And that is, if you can do something that brings you joy and you're able to share it with teammates or friends or family members, that's what life is all about. And that's why I love this book. If you're interested and you're into sports and you're into a book about softball, get this. One of the reasons this book came to be is because back when I was on the CNN desk, and I don't want to do the math, but people would ask, I'd come in on a Saturday. I was working weekends sometimes, and I would come in. People say, "How did the softball team do?" So I say, "Oh, I'm going to do a little write-up," and I would write up, the scores, but then I would embellish and I would add, silly stuff that didn't really happen, and just have a lot of fun with it to sort of entertain everybody at CNN. And the softball team also thought it was funny and humorous. Well, Jim, when I left CNN, he picked up that and made it even better, and so he wrote these dispatches for 7-8 years. CNN even won a championship along the way, and the dispatches are hilarious. So read the book, buy the book, Playing Games at CNN. It'll make you happy. It'll remind you that doing things with people that you're friends with, your teammates, your colleagues, your family, whatever, do things as a community. It'll make you that much happier. And so with that, that'll end this edition of Live on Rebel HQ. I'm David Schuster. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you on the channel with all of our videos and posts and all sorts of fun stuff to come. And thanks for joining us on this particular live stream.